One thing that I want to try also is subsurface scattering. So let's see if that's something that's gonna work, or if it's worth the time, the extra render time. So I'm just gonna go with a copy of this. Core particles SSS, and the main difference is going to be, so first we should apply it. Let's go here, core particles SSS. And instead of playing with the opacity, I'm going to keep the value at 1. We're going to work with the refraction, some roughness, and we'll go to the subsurface and increase the amount, the radius scale. So by default, we're only using the first layer. Let's give some color, bright color. And the radius is going to be 0.1, something more in the scale of the object. Let's see how this one looks. Okay, now the self-illumination is something that we also need to tone down quite a bit. Let's try with 0 at this point. So the effect that we're seeing is just the subsurface scattering of the light inside or going through the particles. It's an interesting result, meaning that I think it's interesting that we have the light going through the object and kind of be displayed. Let's see how much of that is. So you can identify what's actually happening playing with the color. So you can easily identify where the subsurface scattering is actually being seen. But I think the color we had before is a good idea. Something more towards the blue, not completely saturated, but pretty bright. And maybe try and playing with the radius. Maybe it doesn't need to go as deep, something like 0.02. I think it gives us some nice interaction between the light and the particles, and some nice, the volumetrics of the shape of the particles going through the object are also working pretty well. One other thing that we might consider is reducing the size of the particles. So let me minimize this. I think it's interesting. At this point, we kind of need to get closer to figure out the details. So I'm going to increase the resolution of the render. Let's go all the way up to full HD and going into the, yeah, let's see how this looks with an actual render. Not a progressive render, but an actual render. Okay, I think it looks cool. I still think they might be too big at the beginning. If we have this many particles, we can probably begin with a smaller size, small particle size. So let's try playing with that. And let's go here to the set size and 0.002. Let's go with half. See how that works. Pretty interesting, though I do fear that a lot of particles are being completely lost. So I'm not totally sure. We get some very much finer detail, but I'm not 100% convinced this is that much better. I think I am convinced. Yeah, I think that's a good option. Maybe not 1, but 1.2. Cancel this and 1.2 or 1.2. Okay, I think this is an interesting look. So it's up to you. I like this one. Let me kind of snapshot this one. Can remove and remove. So this is where we're at. And let me see another one with the previous shader. Yeah, totally different. Definitely not as interesting. Remember, this is exactly the same particle simulation. We're just changing the particle shader, and this seems a lot more interesting, the previous one. So we have this one and this one. This one seems a lot more interesting. We can try different radius here. I think that might be more relevant at this point. If we go with something like 0.05, the light is going to propagate a lot more, I guess. We have more of that look of self-illumination look in there. Or we can have a lot less. So it does seem a lot more opaque this way. So we have this gradient. Something in between. Yeah, I think this is a nice look. I'm gonna remove all these. And yeah,